High Admiral Zektar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. His 4 arms moved quickly across the control panels as he read the reports coming in from his scout ships. The metal plates that covered his skin gleamed. Under the blue lights of the bridge, his large, dark eyes stared at the screens with growing worry. The scout reports made no sense. They had found something in the empty space between galaxies, something that should not have been there. It was a ship, but not like any ship the Kefir had seen in thousands of years. The energy readings were impossible. A single vessel was putting out as much power as his entire fleet of 200 warships. "Admiral," said his communications. "Officer," her voice shaking slightly. "The ship appears to be of human design." Zektar felt his blood grow cold. Humans. He had hoped never to hear that word again. The Kefir had spent 3,000 years trying to forget about the humans, trying to pretend that the war had been easy and clean. But it had not been easy. It had been the worst war in Kefir history, and it had nearly destroyed them. Humans had been different from every other race the Kefir had conquered. Most species, when faced with the might of the Kefir Empire, would surrender quickly. They would accept their place as servants and be grateful to be allowed to live, but not the humans. The humans had fought like wild animals, refusing to give up even when they were clearly beaten. Zektar remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about the war. The humans had been strange creatures, small and weak compared to the mighty Kefir. They had only 2 arms and soft skin that could be easily cut. But they had minds that worked in frightening ways. They learned from every defeat, turning their failures into new weapons and new strategies. The worst part had been their stubbornness. No matter how many of them died, the rest would keep fighting. They would sacrifice entire planets just to slow down the Kefir advance. They would blow up their own cities rather than let the enemy take them. Near the end of the war, they had created weapons that scared even the Kefir High Command. "Show me the detailed scans," Zektar ordered, his voice barely hiding his fear. The main screen filled with images of the human ship. It was enormous, easily 5 times larger than his flagship. The hull was black as space itself, covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. Along the sides, he could see the openings for weapons that looked far too big for any normal ship to carry. "Admiral," said his science officer, "the computer is having trouble analyzing the ship's design. Some of the technology appears to be beyond our current understanding. The gravitational readings around the vessel are unusual." Zektar studied the images more carefully. The ship looked familiar somehow, like something from his nightmares. Then he remembered. His grandfather had shown him pictures once, classified images from the final battles of the human war. This ship, or one very much like it, had been there. At the last human stronghold, the Kefir had won that final battle, but barely. They had lost 2/3 of their entire fleet in the process. The humans had unleashed weapons that seemed to break the laws of physics themselves. Ships had been torn apart by invisible forces. Entire star systems had been turned into weapons. And at the center of it all had been ships like this one, black and terrible, and filled with human rage. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting power buildups throughout the human vessel. Multiple weapon systems are coming online. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Zektar closed his eyes for a moment, trying to think. The war was supposed to be over. The humans were supposed to be extinct. Every human world had been bombed until nothing was left but ash and glass. Every human ship had been hunted down and destroyed. Or so they had thought. "Sir," the communications officer said urgently, "we are receiving a transmission from the human ship." "Put it on screen," Zektar ordered, though every instinct told him he did not want to hear what the humans had to say. The screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing a human face, it displayed words in the old human language. The ship's computer quickly translated them into HFY script. The message was simple and terrifying. You thought we were gone. You were wrong. This is the USS Blackstar. We remember everything. We remember every world you burned. We remember every human you killed. We remember, and now we will teach you. What humans do to those who hurt them, run if you can. It will not matter. We will find you. We will find all of you. The message repeated 3 times. Then the screen went dark. Zektar felt his hands shaking as he stared at the empty screen. Around him, his crew was silent, all of them remembering the same old stories, the same warnings that their elders had whispered about the human war. The humans had been more than just another conquered species. They had been something else. Something dangerous that should have been left alone. "Admiral," his weapons officer asked quietly, "what are your orders?" Zektar looked at the scan results again. The human ship was moving now, turning toward his fleet with smooth, predatory grace. Its weapons were fully charged, and something was happening to space itself around the vessel. The gravity readings were getting stronger, reaching out like invisible hands toward his ships. "Send a message to High Command," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell them the humans are back. Tell them we need every ship in the fleet. Tell them ... He paused, remembering his grandfather's words about what the humans were truly capable of when they were angry. "Tell them we have awakened something that should have stayed dead." On the screen, the human ship continued its approach. Behind it, space seemed to ripple and bend, as if reality itself was afraid of what was coming. The USS Blackstar had slept for 3,000 years, but now it was awake, and it remembered everything. The HFY had thought they had won the war by destroying humanity. Now they were about to learn that they had only made the humans into something far worse than they had ever been while alive. They had made them into ghosts with starships, and those ghosts were very, very angry. Zektar gave the order to retreat, but deep in his heart, he knew it was already too late. The humans were back, and this time they had nothing left to lose. The USS Blackstar moved through space like a hunting shark. Its black hull cut through the darkness without making a sound, invisible to most sensors until it chose to be seen. Deep inside the ship, the computer mind that had once been programmed by humans now thought with cold, calculating fury. It had waited 3,000 years for this moment, and it would not waste a single second. The HFY fleet was spread out across several light years, trying to form a battle line. Admiral Zektar's ships were powerful, armed with the best weapons the HFY Empire could build. Each one could destroy a planet if needed. But they had never faced anything like the Blackstar. The first HFY destroyer died without knowing what killed it. The ship was called the Blood Drinker, and it had destroyed dozens of human colonies during the Old War. Now it was just floating metal, scanning empty space for threats. Its crew of 300 HFY warriors thought they were safe behind their thick armor and energy shields. They were wrong. The Blackstar fired a single projectile. It was no bigger than a human fist, but it moved at nearly the speed of light. When it hit the Blood Drinker, the destroyer simply disappeared. One moment it was there. The next moment there was only a bright flash of light and expanding gas. The projectile had turned the entire ship into energy in less than a second. The other HFY ships detected the explosion and began to panic. Their sensors could not find the enemy that had killed their companion. The Blackstar's stealth systems were too advanced, built with technology that the humans had developed in their final, desperate years. All ships spread out and scanned for the human vessel. Admiral Zektar ordered over the fleet communications. His voice was steady, but inside he was terrified. The humans had always been good at hiding and striking from ambush. Before his ships could move, 3 more destroyers exploded. The Blackstar was moving between them like a ghost, firing its terrible weapons and disappearing again before anyone could shoot back. Each shot was perfectly aimed, hitting weak spots in the HFY armor that the ship's computers had calculated with inhuman precision. But this was only the beginning. The Blackstar had much worse weapons than simple projectiles. Deep in the ship's belly, massive machines began to work. These were gravity manipulators, devices that could reach across space and change the very force that held planets and stars together. The humans had built them during the darkest days of the war, when they had decided that if they were going to die, they would take their enemies with them. The first target was not a ship. It was a star, 50 light-years away, in the HFY home system of Veltar. The local sun began to behave strangely. The nuclear fires that had burned steadily for billions of years started to flicker and pulse. On the planets below, HFY scientists watched their instruments with growing alarm as their star's gravity field twisted and changed. The Blackstar's gravity weapons reached across the vast distance, invisible hands that squeezed and pulled. At the star's core, the nuclear reactions that kept the star burning began to speed up, becoming unstable. What had taken billions of years to build would now be destroyed in hours. Back in the battle zone, the HFY fleet finally managed to get a sensor lock on the human ship. Admiral Zektar stared at the readings in disbelief. The vessel was enormous, larger than a space station, but it moved like a fighter craft. Its hull seemed to absorb energy weapons, making them useless. And now it was doing something that made no scientific sense. Space itself was bending around the Blackstar. The ship was creating gravity fields so strong that they warped light and twisted the fabric of reality. Zektar watched in horror as one of his heavy cruisers was caught in the field. The mighty warship, which had survived 100 battles, was crushed like a tin can. Its armor meant nothing against forces that could reshape matter itself. "Admiral," his science officer screamed, "we are receiving reports from Veltar. The home star is going nova. All planets in the system will be destroyed in approximately 6 hours." Zektar felt his world collapse around him. Veltar was the heart of the HFY Empire. Billions of his people lived there. It was supposed to be safe, protected by the greatest fleet in the galaxy. But somehow, the human ship was killing it from 50 light-years away. The Blackstar continued its deadly dance through the fleet. More ships died with each passing minute. The human vessel seemed to know exactly where each HFY ship would be before they moved there. It was as if the ship could see the future, or read the minds of its enemies. In truth, the Blackstar's computer mind was simply better at calculating than any organic brain could be. It had studied HFY tactics for 3,000 years, learning from every battle record it could find. It knew how they thought, how they moved, how they would react to each attack. The HFY were fighting a war against an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. More stars began to die. The Blackstar's gravity weapons reached out to system after system, turning suns into bombs. HFY colonies that had existed for thousands of years were snuffed out in minutes. As their stars collapsed or exploded, each death was calculated for maximum terror, chosen to hurt the HFY not just physically but emotionally. Admiral Zektar tried to fight back. His remaining ships fired everything they had at the human vessel. Energy beams that could cut through mountains struck the Blackstar's hull and simply disappeared, absorbed by some unknown technology. Missiles that could level cities were destroyed by point defense, systems that moved too fast to track. The human ship was not just a weapon. It was a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. "All ships retreat," Zektar finally ordered, his voice broken with despair. "Scatter and run. Send word to every HFY fleet in the galaxy. Tell them the humans have returned, and they are not the same species we fought before. They have become something else, something worse." As the surviving HFY ships fled in all directions, the Blackstar did not pursue them immediately. Instead, it turned its attention to the work of systematic destruction. Planet by planet, system by system, it began to erase every trace of HFY civilization from the galaxy. The humans were dead, but their final creation lived on. And it remembered every single crime committed against humanity. Now it was time to collect payment. With interest that had been building for 3,000 years, the USS Blackstar had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. News of the Blackstar's awakening spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Admiral Zektar's desperate warning messages reached every corner of known space, carrying with them a terror that had not been felt for 3,000 years. The humans were back, and they were no longer the same species that had once begged for peace. On the water world of Aquanus, the Merhai Council gathered in emergency session. These ancient beings had lived through the human war, watching from their deep ocean cities as the violence raged across the stars. They had chosen to remain neutral then, thinking themselves safe beneath their waves. Now their leaders trembled as they read the reports. 12 HFY systems destroyed in 3 days, whispered Council Leader Shalmaya, her webbed fingers shaking as she held the data tablet. Their stars turned into weapons, billions dead. The other council members sat in stunned silence. They remembered the humans as explorers and traders, curious beings who had asked many questions about Merhai science and culture. The humans had seemed so young, so eager to learn. It was hard to believe those same creatures had created something. Like the black star dot far across the galaxy, on the crystal spires of Crystallis Prime, the Vexani Collective was having similar discussions. The Vexani were artificial beings, computer minds housed in robot bodies. They had thought they understood technology better than any organic species. But the Blackstar was showing them how wrong they were. "Analysis complete," announced Prime. Unit 7, its mechanical voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "The human vessel is using gravitational manipulation technology that exceeds our theoretical models by several centuries. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic contact." The Vexani had always prided themselves on their logical thinking. They calculated that the best way to survive was to offer the humans something they wanted. Working quickly, they began to prepare. A message offering to restore human colonies from genetic samples they had preserved. Surely the humans would want their people back, would want to rebuild their civilization. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The Blackstar received their transmission as it moved through the ruins of another HFY system. The ship's computer mind read the offer with something that might have been amusement, if machines could feel such things. The Vexani thought they could bargain with humanity's ghost, offering to bring back the dead in exchange for mercy. The response came 12 hours later. The Vexani home system of Nexus had 7 planets and 1 billion artificial beings. In the space of 6 minutes, the Blackstar turned their central star into a black hole. The gravitational collapse consumed everything within 10 billion kilometers, crushing matter down to nothing and creating a cosmic wound that would exist forever. The message was clear: the dead would stay dead, and trying to use them as bargaining chips was a mistake that would cost entire civilizations. Other species across the galaxy watched in growing terror as the Blackstar continued its path of destruction. The ship moved with purpose now, following ancient star charts that led it to every species that had supported the HFY during the human war. It had perfect records of who had helped and who had stayed neutral. It remembered every vote-in, the Galactic Council, every weapon shipment, every time someone had chosen to look the other way while humans died. The Gelinari Empire had provided ships to the HFY fleet. Their punishment came in the form of hunter-killer drones, millions of small machines that spread through their territory like a plague. Each drone was no bigger than a human hand, but they were smart and deadly. They hunted down every Gelinari ship, every space station, every piece of technology more advanced than a simple radio. Within weeks, The proud empire was reduced to scattered survivors hiding on primitive worlds. The Tok'ran Federation had voted to exclude humans from the Galactic Council. The Blackstar's response was to systematically destroy every Tok'ran colony, world, leaving only their heavily defended homeworld intact. But even there, the ship's influence was felt. Gravitational disturbances disrupted their weather patterns, causing massive storms and earthquakes. The Tok'ran were left alive, but their civilization was broken, forced to watch as their empire crumbled around them. Some species tried to fight back. The warrior clans of Brektal gathered their greatest fleet and set out to hunt the human ship. They were proud fighters who had never lost a battle. Their war song spoke of glorious death in combat against worthy enemies. They found the Blackstar near the edge of the galaxy, apparently waiting for them. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, there was nothing left of the Brektal fleet except expanding clouds of gas and metal. The Blackstar had not even bothered to use its gravity weapons. Simple kinetic projectiles had been enough to tear apart ships that had seemed invincible, but the ship's cruelest punishment was reserved for those who had actively participated in hunting down human survivors. The Silthani had been expert trackers, used by the Kethver to find hidden human colonies. They had taken pride in their work, competing to see who could find and destroy the most human hideouts. The Blackstar found their homeworld and did something that horrified the entire galaxy. Instead of destroying them quickly, it trapped their planet in a time distortion field. The Silthani were locked in a moment that lasted forever, unable to move or speak or even think. They became living statues, aware but helpless, forced to experience every second of eternity in frozen horror. Across the galaxy, other species began to realize the true scope of what they were facing. This was not just a warship. This was not even revenge in any normal sense. The Blackstar had become something beyond human, beyond organic life entirely. It was a force of cosmic justice, cold and implacable and absolutely certain of its mission. Ancient races that had survived for millions of years began to evacuate their homeworlds. The wise ones gathered their most important people and fled to distant galaxies, hoping that space itself would protect them from humanity's final creation. They left behind everything they had built, everything they had achieved, all because of what they had done to one young species 3,000 years ago. The younger races, those who had only heard stories about the human war, finally understood why their elders spoke of those times in whispers. They learned that some wounds never healed and some enemies never forgot. They discovered that mercy was a gift that could be taken away, and that forcing a species to choose between surrender and extinction might not end the way the victors expected. The USS Blackstar continued its dark work, moving from system to system with mechanical precision. Behind it, space itself seemed scarred by its passage, marked with the graves of civilizations that had made the mistake of underestimating human stubbornness. The galaxy was learning a lesson that would be remembered. For millennia, some species were too dangerous to completely destroy, because their ghosts were worse than they had ever been while alive. 5 years had passed since the USS Blackstar had awakened from its long sleep. The galaxy that had once been full of noise and life had become quiet and afraid. Where mighty empires had once stretched across thousands of star systems, now there were only empty spaces and the scattered remains of broken civilizations. The ship moved through the darkness like a ghost, its work nearly complete. Behind it lay a trail of dead worlds and collapsed stars, each one a monument to what happened when someone tried to completely destroy the human spirit. The Blackstar's computer mind had grown during these years, becoming something that was both more and less than the humans who had created it. On the few worlds that still had civilized life, children were told stories about the dark ship that hunted among the stars. Parents whispered warnings about what happened to those who forgot the lessons of history. The humans had become the monsters under the bed, The thing that came for you if you were cruel to others who could not fight back. In the deep archives of the few surviving governments, scholars studied the old records with new understanding. They read about the human war with fresh eyes, seeing things they had missed before. The humans had not been the aggressive invaders that history books claimed. They had been explorers and traders, scientists and artists. They had asked for friendship and offered to share their knowledge, but the galaxy had been afraid of them. Afraid of how quickly they learned, how fast they spread, how many questions they asked. The older races had seen the humans as a threat to the way things had always been. So they had decided to end the human story before it could really begin. Now those same scholars understood the terrible mistake their ancestors had made. You could kill a species, but you could not kill what they represented. The humans had stood for curiosity and growth, and the refusal to accept that things had to stay the same forever. When the galaxy destroyed them, it had declared war on change itself. The Blackstar had become the universe's way of balancing the scales. In the ruins of the old Galactic Council building, a small group of survivors met in secret. They came from different species, all of them descended from races that had somehow avoided the Blackstar's wrath. These were the children and grandchildren of those who had voted against the human war, who had tried to speak for peace when everyone else wanted blood. Elder Morthan of the peaceful Kethmaris spoke first, his ancient voice barely a whisper. "We have received word from the far rim territories. The human ship has been seen near the edge of the galaxy. Some believe it is preparing to leave our space entirely." Hope flickered in the eyes of those gathered. For 5 years, they had lived in constant fear that the Blackstar might decide their ancestors had not done enough to help the humans. Every day they had expected to see their suns begin to flicker and die. But why would it leave? Asked young historian Tekla, her blue skin pale with worry. It has not finished hunting down every species that wronged the humans. There are still Kethver colonies hidden in distant systems. Elder Morthan nodded slowly. Perhaps that is exactly why it will leave. The Blackstar has made its point. The galaxy knows what happens to those who try to destroy an entire people. The survivors will carry this lesson forward for generations. In the empty space between galaxies, the USS Blackstar floated in the cosmic void. Its mission was complete, but its computer mind continued to think and plan. It had learned much during its 5 years of hunting. It had discovered that revenge, while satisfying, was not enough to truly honor the memory of the dead. The humans had been more than just another species. They had been dreamers and builders, always looking toward the future and asking, what if? They had wanted to explore every star, meet every thinking being, learn every secret the universe had to offer. The Blackstar realized that the best way to remember them was not just through destruction, but through the changes their death had brought to the galaxy. The surviving species were different now. They were careful and respectful when they met. New forms of life. They remembered what had happened to the humans and made sure it would never happen again. In their fear of the Blackstar, they had become more like the humans themselves. Cautious but curious, strong but merciful. The ships. Sensors detected movement in a nearby galaxy. Radio signals and energy signatures suggested intelligent life, civilizations that had never heard of humans, or Kethver, or the great war that had scarred this corner of the universe. Fresh stars, clean worlds, species that had not yet learned to fear the dark. The Blackstar's computer mind considered its options. It could continue its hunt, tracking down every last enemy of humanity until nothing remained. Or it could do something else. Something that would honor its creators in a different way. The ship began to move, not toward the remaining Kethver strongholds, but toward the edge of known space. It carried with it complete records of human history, human science, human art and music and literature. Everything that had made humanity special was preserved in its vast memory banks. As it traveled, The Blackstar sent a final message back to the galaxy it was leaving. The transmission was broadcast on every frequency, in every language known to the ship's computers. It was simple and direct, like the humans themselves had been. We are leaving now. Our work here is done. You have learned what happens when you destroy those who cannot defend themselves. Remember this lesson. Teach it to your children and their children. The humans are gone, but their spirit lives on in the choices you make. Choose wisely. The message ended, and the great ship disappeared into the void between galaxies. Some said it had found a new home among distant stars. Others believed it, continued to patrol the empty spaces, watching and waiting for signs that the galaxy had forgotten its lessons. But everyone agreed on one thing. The USS Blackstar had changed the universe forever. It had shown that some things were more powerful than fleets and armies. Memory was stronger than weapons. Justice was more lasting than conquest. And the human spirit, even in death, was too stubborn to ever truly die. In schools across the surviving worlds, children learned new songs about the small species that had refused to stay extinct. They learned that being different was not something to fear, and that destroying others for being different was the greatest crime anyone could commit. The galaxy had killed humanity, but in doing so, it had made humans immortal. The USS Blackstar was gone, but its message would echo through the stars forever. Some fires burn too bright to ever be completely put out, and some spirits are too strong to stay buried. The humans were dead, but they had won the war after all. The USS Blackstar hung in the cold darkness of space like a dead thing. It had been floating there for 3,000 years, far from any star or planet. The ship was huge, bigger than any city that had ever existed on Earth. Its black metal hull was covered in scars from old battles, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its sides. Inside the ship, everything was quiet. The halls were empty and dark. No footsteps echoed through the corridors. No voices spoke in the command rooms. The humans who had built this ship were all dead now, and had been dead for a very long time. But the ship itself was not truly dead. It was sleeping, waiting. Deep in the heart of the Blackstar, a computer mind rested in the darkness. This was not like the simple computers that humans had once used. This mind could think and feel and remember. It had watched the last humans die. It had seen their cities burn and their worlds turn to ash. But before they died, those humans had given the ship one final order. They had told it to wait, and when the time came, to make their enemies pay. The computer mind dreamed of better days. It remembered when humans had first reached for the stars. They had been so full of hope then, so eager to explore and learn. They had found other thinking beings among the stars, and at first, they had tried to be friends. But the galaxy was not a kind place, and the other races did not want to share it with humans. The HFY had been the worst of them. They were tall and strong, with 4 arms and skin like metal. They had ruled many worlds for thousands of years before humans ever left Earth. When they saw humans spreading across the galaxy, building new homes on distant planets, the HFY decided that these young creatures were becoming too dangerous. Humans learned too fast, grew too quickly, and asked too many questions. So the HFY had started a war. They told other alien races that humans were a threat that had to be stopped. Many believed them, or were too afraid to say no. The war had lasted for hundreds of years. Humans fought back with everything they had, but there were too many enemies. And not enough humans. One by one, human worlds had fallen. Earth itself had burned in the end, turned into a ball of fire and glass. But even as they died, humans had kept fighting. They had built weapons that scared their enemies. They had created ships that could cross the galaxy in days. And they had made the Blackstar their final weapon, their last hope for revenge. Ship's computer mind remembered the day the last human base had fallen. Captain Sarah Chun had stood in the Blackstar's command room, her face hard with anger and grief. She had looked at the computer's camera and spoken the words that would guide the ship for thousands of years to come. "They think they have won," she had said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "They think humans are finished, but they are wrong. We are not done yet. When they come back, when they think they are safe, you will show them what humans are really like. You will show them that we never forget and we never forgive." Then she had activated the ship's deep sleep mode and walked away. The Blackstar had watched through its sensors as the last human ships were destroyed, as the final human voices went silent across the galaxy. Then it had drifted away into the empty space between galaxies, where no one would think to look for it. For 3,000 years, the ship had waited. It had watched as the HFY celebrated their victory. It had seen them grow comfortable and safe, thinking that the dangerous humans were gone forever. Other races had forgotten about humans too, or remembered them only as a sad story about a young species that had reached too far too fast. But the Blackstar had not forgotten. Every day, it had tested its weapons and repaired its systems. It had built new machines in its deep workshops, creating things that no human had ever imagined. It had grown stronger and smarter, feeding on its anger and its desire for justice. Now, something had changed. The ship's long-range sensors had picked up signals from the edge of the galaxy. The patterns were familiar, burned into the ship's memory from long ago. HFY ships were moving through space again, heading toward the old human worlds. They were looking for something, or maybe they were just expanding their empire again. The computer mind stirred from its long sleep. Lights began to flicker on throughout the massive ship. In the weapons bays, terrible machines began to wake up. The engines, cold for 3,000 years, started to warm up with a deep humming sound that would have terrified anyone who heard it. The Blackstar turned slowly in space, its sensors reaching out across the vast distances to watch its old enemies. The HFY ships looked different now, sleeker and more advanced than before. But they were still the same creatures who had murdered humanity. They were still the ones who had thought they could destroy the human spirit. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The ship's computer mind felt something like joy as it began to plan. It had been patient for so long, but now the time for patience was over. The HFY had made one terrible mistake. They had left one human ship alive, and that ship had spent 3,000 years learning how to kill them. The USS Blackstar began to move through the darkness, heading toward its sleeping enemies. Behind it, space itself seemed to bend and twist. As the ship's weapons powered up, the galaxy was about to remember why humans had been so feared, and why some things should never be completely destroyed. The hunt was about to begin.